what I like to do is talk about what I consider what all of you should do before you step and place one hand in the water, put one foot on the bike, or take one step out that door. Before you do any sort of exercise, in my opinion, what you ought to do is come up with goals. And I consider goals to be the foundation of all your training. You got to start somewhere, and you have to start with goals. If you don't have goals, you could be spinning your wheels quite a bit with your training. So, I like to have this quote right here to start it off. An intelligent plan is the first step to success. The man who knows where he is going and who knows what progress he is making has a pretty good idea when he'll arrive. Planning is the open road to your destination. If you don't know where you're going, how can you expect to get there? If you don't know where you're going, how can you expect to get there? I spoke down in Hilton Head several months ago and gave this quote. I'm like, you know what? I don't even know who Basil S. Walsh is. So I did a Google search, and all I got was this quote. So I still don't know who Basil S. Walsh is, but he must have come up with a pretty good quote, and I like it, and he's a businessman of some sort. But I think that's an important quote. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. If I'm the hub of a bike wheel, I can use, 28, 32 spokes? I can go in any direction I want, because you know what? I don't know where I'm going. I don't have that solid rim, that wheel that attaches from the spokes to the hub. I don't have that rim there that I say, okay, I'm going to take this spoke there because I see the rim. That's where the ending is. I can pick any spoke and go anywhere I want. But that's not what we want to do. We don't want to just go anywhere. All right, so you want to have the hub. You want to have just one or two spokes going to that rim. You want to have a destination point. Dreams versus goals. Dreams are what you want. You know, when you were a little kid, what did you dream of? I dreamed of a lot of things. I dreamt of being an airplane pilot. I dreamt of wanting to be a professional athlete that made a lot of money. I was a professional athlete. Didn't really make the money, but, you know, so those are the dreams that I have. But you have to figure out, how do you get there? And that's what you use goals. You use goals to try to reach those dreams. So goals are the action steps to get you to your dreams. Purposes of goals. Keep yourself on track. I have guardrails there. Why would I have guardrails there?
Keep you going along the right way.
Right. If you're coming down a mountain pass and you have guardrails, what are the guardrails supposed to do?
Guide you along the right.
They're supposed to keep you from going off the road. They're supposed to guide you. Back in 1990, I was coming down a steep path, and a steep road on my bike, slipped on some gravel while making a turn, bounced off the guardrail. That kept me from going at least over the road, but that's something that guardrail kept me going in the right path. Just as your goals should be like guardrails, keeping you on the right path. Give yourself direction in both your athletic, personal, and professional life. What I'm talking about for goal setting today is not just for athletics, but you can use goals for anything. You can use goals for your work life. A lot of people use financial goals. They say, okay, this year I want to make so much money. Next year I want to make so much money. They use that materialistic aspect to drive them further. For us as athletes, we have a tendency to have our goals be something different, more athletic oriented. But you can use it for life, such as with your family, a variety of goals that you can set forth. Give yourself a chance to reach your potential, such as when and what is success. If you don't have goals, how can you pat yourself on the back? If I got to a certain point, if I had a most incredible season with competing 8 triathlons, and I did personal bests in 3 of them, but I never wrote them down, I never knew I had personal bests, I never knew that this was the time that I wanted to break, how can I say, oh, you achieved it, you reached your goal? So goals will allow you to say to yourself, I made it. I set this thing forth. I had this type of year last year. This is the year I wanted to have this year. I achieved this. Thank goodness. Pat myself on the back. Because if you didn't have that goal, you'd say, I don't know if I was successful or not. If you don't have financial goals in this world, if you don't say to yourself, okay, this year I'm making $50,000, next year I want to make $65,000 or $70,000, If you didn't have that goal set, and if you reach $70,000, you're like, I don't know if I'm successful or not, because I didn't have goals to reach. Maximize your activity and energy. Ship with or without a rudder. When I give workouts to my athletes, I like to say that every workout has a purpose. We're going somewhere. We had 3 or 4 goals that we set at the beginning of the year. We have training objectives of how to achieve them. So I'm using the workouts that I give my athletes and trying to reach those objectives, whether it be someone who's trying to achieve sprint triathlon or Ironman triathlon. Every workout has an objective. My ship with that athlete is going to a certain point. Now, a lot of people who don't have coaches, they're like a ship without a rudder. They go out every day and they train with their swim, their bike, their run, but you know what they're doing is they're going in circles. They're training in circles. They're doing that same 30-minute run every day, 5 times a week. And then they go out and they do their hour bike 4 times a week. But they're not doing isolated leg training. They're not doing a different intensity. It's all the same thing. So what they're doing is they're just like a ship without a rudder. They're not going anywhere. They have no destination. That's what goals help to do. Measure your results. Concrete and tangible evidence. Again, if you don't have it in writing, you're less likely to achieve your goals, and also you're less likely to remember your goals. So they need to be tangible and they need to be measurable. You need to be able to write those things down. There are 2 sets of goals, long-term and short-term. To achieve your short-term goals, consider the following. Share your goals with others. Peer pressure can be fun. When I set goals, when I say, hey, I want to be national champion, I tell people. So why is that? Because I want to be accountable to those people. How many of you have shared your goals with other people? You typically probably tell friends, you tell your spouse, you say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is the goal I want to do, I need to achieve it. If you kept those goals to yourself, you might be less likely to achieve those goals. So it's that peer pressure. It's that, oh my God, I told Mark that I have to do this thing, and I'm 2 months out from it, and I haven't really trained the way I wanted to. I better get out the door and start training. Because Mark's going to ask me, he's going to be like, hey, Wes, how'd you do in that race? Well, I didn't do that well. But if I were to have told him, I'd be like, oh, I got to start training. I could say, Mark, when he asks me again, I'll say, yeah, I actually did pretty well. Thank you for asking. So it's great to have that, to have other people know about it. Make your short-term goals compatible with your long-term goals, such as training objectives. There's an athlete who I just started coaching, and his goal is to do Ironman Florida this year. And he's only been doing triathlons for 2 years. He's been building up the base, and Ironman Florida is his main goal. So what I ask my athletes is I say, okay, please give me the races that you want to do this year. And again, long-term down the road, Ironman Florida is back in November, and this was about 2 months ago. And he gave me all the races he wanted to do. And he had like 5 sprints and 1 Olympic, and then Ironman Florida. Well, I talked to him. I said, hey, this is what you want to do. We'll work at it. But I think that in pursuing your Ironman, I think you ought to at least do 1, maybe 2 half Ironmans instead of the sprint distances. So you got to have your short-term goals of maybe doing a half Ironman instead of a sprint distance to correlate to what your long-term goal is of Ironman. All right, so make sure that they're on the same page. If you are successful with your short-term goals, your long-term goals will fall into place. My athlete, by doing 1 or 2 half Ironman, is going to realize what it's like to do an Ironman distance a lot better than if you were just to do sprint races and then do an Ironman distance. So his short-term goals of that half Ironman is going to help him later on for his Ironman distance. Goals are not only athletic, but also apply to other areas in our lives, such as family and work. Recently, I just passed my real estate exam, so I am not just a triathlon coach, I'm now a real estate broker. It's a good niche. It's a good niche market. But one of the interesting things that I read was a study, and they asked brokers from around the country. They took about, I think it was 600 brokers that they took from around the country, and they asked them, they said, how many of you have goals? Well, 83% of the people had no goals at all. They had no goals. They're a real estate broker, and they're like, okay, I got my license. What do I do? I'm just going to sit around and twiddle my thumbs, or I'll make a few phone calls and see if anyone will call me back. 83% of the people had no goals. 14% of the people had unwritten goals. So they had them in their head, but they're unwritten. And then only 3%, 3% of the people wrote their goals down. Well, the study came back with, it asked them a year later, it said, how'd you do that year? Those 14% who had unwritten goals made 300% more commissions than those that had no goals at all. Those that did write their goals down, those 3%, had 1,000% more commissions than those that wrote no goals. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go home, write 3 goals about real estate, and make 1,000% over someone who's making $30,000 a year. I can go and make a lot of money. That'd be nice. All I have to do is write them down. But think of that. Consider that into your athletic career. The ability to improve your time by 1,000%. Okay, relatively speaking, you're not going to be able to do that. But think of the effect by, if you're to take your written goals down, you might actually take 6-7 minutes off your time just by writing them down.